Hi, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you today. I often get asked by first-time practice leaders, how do you build and scale a design practice? Where do you start? And how do you know you're doing the right thing? In my consulting, I help organizations establish and develop their innovation practices, often helping them improve or evolve the design practice or even start it from scratch. And from that experience, I want to share a little bit with you today of how I help organizations establish and grow their design practice. And this question often feels like an opaque and a daunting journey into uncharted territory. And the question behind that, how do you start? How do you get from A to B? Is often really the question of, can you give me a clear plan? Give me a checklist, a fail-safe map. How do I get from where I am right now to that thriving design practice? And I'll share the unfortunate punchline with you straight away. The answer is, it depends. It's a deeply contextual question, and I think Alison has already touched on that as well. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. Instead, I've broken down the journey into 3 steps, and I want to share with you, the most important questions that you need to address along the way. You'll find that some of them you're probably answering great already. Perhaps others open more questions up around, how can I do that better? How can I dive into this topic and see how we can improve? But the 3 steps are, first of all, from 0 to 1. How do you attract your first hires? Where do you start? Then the second step is, how do you develop that thriving team, that thriving practice? In the beginning, the team and the practice might be synonymous, right? That it's one group of people perhaps possibly working together, possibly not. So I think the practice is the whole group of designers, for example, or any other type of practitioners that are working together in an organization. So how do you help create a community around that? And we'll be looking at that particularly in the 3rd step. How do you scale beyond that first group, that first boundary, that first team, to having a thriving practice across your organization? I mentioned this is deeply contextual, so let me share with you my most recent context. I was heading up the design practice at Pivotal Labs. That's a US-based consultancy, a global consultancy that helps organizations with more user-centered, lean, agile ways of working, and helps their teams learn these practices as well. I was hired as their first designer outside of North America, and I helped establish the London office and build a design practice there from scratch, and then help 4 more practices get off the ground in Europe while we're expanding rapidly. In our consulting work, we help our clients advance and establish their practices as well. And from there, I took on the role of leading the practice globally across 20 teams across the globe for a US-based organization. So quite a spread and quite a challenge in keeping all of those people connected and working together. Design practices can take many shapes and sizes, and there's no right or wrong answer, or perhaps there's a few wrong answers, but there's a lot of breadth there, and you need to figure out what works best in your situation. For example, is a centralized or a distributed team working well in your context for the work you need to do, the goals you have, the way you work together with other teams? Do you already have an established team, or is it brand new? A new team will need more different help, more help. Is it in one place or crossing boundaries? For example, geographies, time zones, even cultures. How does that affect your practice? Like how people work, but also keeping them connected. Is it remote or in person? And I don't need to add to this refrain of, gosh, we've all experienced how differently you need to support that in the last couple of months. In my most recent context, again, we worked in cross-disciplinary product teams alongside of our clients to teach them those user-centered, lean and agile product practices. But that meant that our team rarely got to work with each other, like designers rarely got to work with each other. So again, quite a specific need for a practice of how do we keep that connected? How do we keep people thriving together? And of course, it also depends on how your organization is structured. That will help give you some guidance on how to connect, to keep your practice connected. But to get started, imagine this. You're a designer in a company, and perhaps this company is growing and you have a need to increase your design capacity. It's an exciting opportunity, but it's also quite a shift from being a practitioner. And your first question is, I need to hire someone because someone just asked me to increase that capacity, but who do I need to hire right now? To help you identify who to hire next, get a really good understanding of what your skills and experience you need. Map what skills you have available, reflect on what's needed, reflect on what capabilities are necessary to do the job well, and what gaps there might be that you need to be able to bridge. When starting your practice and building a design practice, chances are the organization doesn't already use design to its fullest potential. So what work would you believe would create the most value, even if you're not doing that kind of work right now already? Are there any capabilities you need to be able to do that work? Do you need to build them? Would you be able to hire them in? Your goal is to articulate the necessary skills to set someone up for success in their current role. And also you need to be able to support the practice going forward, at least into the sort of near-term future. And one thing that I find particularly important is consider what support you can give a new hire at the moment. Are you able to help them learn necessary skills on the job right now? Are you able to support them if they're not confident about all aspects of their job? And be really realistic about that. I see a lot of teams overconfident here. They think, we can bring on an early stage practitioner, it would be fantastic to mentor someone into the role, but often they don't have the time necessary in a sustained way to actually be able to do that. And I often find some early stage practitioners who are under-supported in their work and quite, not necessarily swimming in the deep end, but sometimes sinking. So when starting a practice, my advice is to start with experienced generalists. You need people who can work independently across a wide range of challenges. With each new hire, you have an opportunity to build up practice capabilities. We're looking at these skills charts in this picture, right? So what you're trying to do is create a well-rounded practice where you have all of those skills in-house, and not everyone is good at everything. So it's really helpful to understand who's good at what, and build a complementary group around that. So now that you have an idea of what you're looking for, how do you attract the people you would like to hire? If you're starting from scratch, like I was in that context and a few times before, it's really unlikely that your company already has a reputation in the market to be a great destination for designers. They might have never heard of you, right? So perhaps you don't even have much work to show yet of how awesome the work could be once you have more work going, or once you have more designers on board. So how do you create this destination? How do you explain in this unique situation what this would look like? You have an opportunity to be intentional about the practice and the design culture you're developing, and very much picking up on Alison's themes here. It's also it also helps you to paint a picture of what mission people will be joining. And I know Alison already explained this, so I'll keep it very brief. Just a quick reminder to create this engagement and that question of what does even how do you even create engagement in the workplace? Daniel Pink has explained that motivation, that engagement is based on autonomy, that need to direct your own work and of course your own life as well. Mastery, to get better and better at something that matters to you. and purpose. People want to join a mission that matters, want to work on something that's interesting. They want to be part of something important. So to help you identify what you need beyond skill sets, look at, and also help a potential hire identify whether your opportunity is a great fit for them, something that they want to join, something that matches their goals. Start with describing the purpose of the practice and the role. So really the question is, what's your North Star for your practice? If you articulate that, at least a straw man, at least a prototype of it, you can share that with others this early on. You're describing the purpose and you're setting the tone for the practice culture. What makes this place different, and how do you expect people to show up together? So that involves articulating your goals, your values, your principles for the practice. Ground that in the company's mission and values, of course, but and sometimes you need to extend and translate that to be able to guide a design practice. How do you build on what's already there? What makes sense for a design practice? What's your vision for the discipline at your company? And what's your goal for the work? And I think this is critical, particularly because you want to be able to hire for culture add and values fit, rather than just for skill sets. So you need to have that articulated, those values articulated first, so you can actually look for the right people. And of course, this will evolve over time with the team, but you need to create a starting point. We all know that culture is a verb and not a noun, right? It's the interplay between people. You can't just prescribe it for people. But, and as a rule of thumb, values and principles are something that evolves quite slowly with a group. But practices can evolve quite quickly, especially in our environment, to keep up with the ever-changing technology context that we're working in. So how we practice our design work, for example, or research work, might just change depending on what problems we're trying to solve. So with your vision in place, and you have a great opportunity to share what you do with the community. You want to be able to create that reputation. You want to be able to put your name on the map so people understand you exist in the very early stages, right? But also to help them understand what the possibilities and the opportunities are. So there are many ways to be active in the local community. And now that we're all online, it's even easier to be able to tap into the global community. But you can host events, you can sponsor, you can volunteer, or even speak. Get involved in any way possible. It means you have a great way to connect to people. Even some people who might be looking for a new job, right? You can understand better what their needs are, what they're looking for, and if you're creating a great match for that. So the next question is, how do you find the right person to add to the team? Finding the right people is critical. Every new person changes the dynamic of the team. And I feel one wrong hire can be a really costly mistake. It can be difficult to fix. It can make other people leave, perhaps, or it can be an all-around frustrating experience for everyone involved. So it's worth investing time in honing your approach. I have a few questions around that for you. So does your job description help you find the right people? How do you present yourself even in that job description? Are your expectations realistic? And is it a fair value exchange of what you expect and what work you can offer? Is that offer competitive? There might be a gap between the job that needs to be done and the budget you're given. Does that constrain you in any way? How is your interview process fine-tuned so you and that candidate can quickly and confidently make a hiring decision? Are there any unintended biases you've introduced of how you've designed your recruiting process? Is it helping you identify a culture add and values fit? If you're If you have hiring partners, how do you calibrate with them what you're looking for? And how do you involve the team? Do they all have a shared understanding of what you're looking for? And if we look at this from the other side, what's a candidate's experience like from that first interaction with you all the way to hopefully starting their role? So now that you have people hopefully joining, how do you create that shared practice? And I feel, especially here, we're picking up on a lot of themes from Alison's talk around how to create team collaboration, team practice. I feel Rebecca describes this first challenge really well. Let me quickly read this for you. Asymmetrical knowledge is the first challenge to overcome when bringing together a new team. As leaders, we need to provide a structure for the team to define a starting point and shared process for working through the problem. People bring their own experiences, biases, and hypotheses to every challenge. So the sooner we can build a shared understanding of a problem and the solution finding process, the faster we can engage the power of multidisciplinary teams. And I think it's really the question of, how do you set everyone up for success and create a shared agreement and a shared understanding of how we work together? What our goals are and what's expected of us. I personally prefer to align on principles and outcomes rather than to prescribe tools and artifacts. But that also means you need to be able to articulate what business are we in, what value are we creating for the organization, and what value are we creating for the users. How do you provide that context in a repeatable way? Particularly, if you think particularly through onboarding and other ways of sharing. It's not just information sharing, and you need to create a great degree of connection, trust, confidence, paired with empathy and humility to help each team member work autonomously, but also collaboratively. And I want to pick up on Alison's brilliant idea of that team user manual, writing a manual to how best to work with you. I think for teams to be able to understand how to best engage with each other, how to collaborate well with each other, I think it's a brilliant tool. And I think it fits well into something like creating a team charter together. This is only one template. Mural has provided some great templates for this teaming work, of this team alignment work. It's well worth checking out. There's many other formats for this too, in terms of coming together as a group, explore how you want to work together, decide how you will work together, and then check regularly to see how it's working. So very much what Alison was saying about that design process on your design process. How do you prototype, iterate, keep checking that it's working well. And it's key to be able to develop norms together, to share, to create those shared goals, the vision and principles. What does success look like for the team? Reflect on what practices help us get there, and how do we support each other. It's important to agree that where you're flexible and what's necessary. It removes uncertainty, and you can keep flexibility wherever possible to keep improving. I feel like if you are too prescriptive in how you're working, you remove opportunity to explore better ways of working. One thing I found really helpful to learn was that when teams form, it takes some time for them to perform well, and you can't expect them to perform well immediately. And I found it incredibly valuable to understand Bruce Tuckman's process of how he describes groups work together. Initially, people tend to be polite and they're quite positive during the forming phase. A few people might be a little bit anxious because they haven't quite understood yet what's expected of the group. But overall, positive, start, everyone's leaning in, everyone's polite. But they move, as they start working together, they move on to challenging each other during the storming phase. They start questioning approaches and different people's goals. And being able to move through that to gradually resolve their differences through the norming phase, teams finally get to the performing stage where they've settled into a groove together and it feels easy to achieve goals together and become more productive. And this doesn't only happen when you first bring when you first hire people and bring a practice together, but this happens every time you bring a group together to collaborate, whether it's a project team or you're bringing a new person on board. So this is quite a cyclical approach. So the question is, what helps us create happy and high-performing teams? People who really thrive, in that environment where they can do their best work. They really enjoy working together. And for brevity, I found a great analysis from Shane Snow. He's the author of Dream Teams, and he's put this handy checklist together. But I hope it gives a quick overview. So teams that don't work well together have two things lacking, and they lack trust and alignment. So teams that work well together, they have trust, they have alignment, they have healthy boundaries, they have social awareness, empathy, and they also have information transparency. And what sets up apart the really high-performing teams is the additional support of purpose, psychological safety, diversity, productive conflict, and humility. So now that you have a team up and running, how do you nurture growth? There are lots of opportunities to foster growth and across the practice. I want to mention 4 here. First of all, you need to foster that culture of continuous learning. Alison mentioned this as a growth mindset. It's so crucial as a foundation. That means you need room for experimentation, for learning, for feedback, and also for reflection. If that's not already part of your company DNA, shifting that culture and creating that psychological safety won't happen overnight. But a good way to start is to create rituals for designers to collaborate, share feedback, and exchange information. And how do you support individual growth? Once you've brought somebody on board, your team, someone onto your team, you need to help them chart and support their next phase of their career growth. How do you help them understand what's expected of them to progress? How do you help them explore which direction they actually want to grow in? Does the company have a competency framework? Is it already translated for design? Is that framework universally understood? They often have a lot of challenges. Is the career path seen as a valuable growth path? And how do you set goals, and how do you review their progress together? Are expectations of your practice comparable to others? I often see we have such a breadth to our practice that our bar of what's expected for a designer to grow can sometimes be much, much broader than that of other practices. The third growth opportunity is to extend your capabilities of your practice. We've talked about this already in assessing that as we started, but it's a continuous process to mature your capabilities, to look at the value you're creating and how well the practice is integrated and leveraged across the organization. And fourth, you need to extend that influence of your practice across the organization too. In the beginning, other teams often don't yet know how to best collaborate with you. How do you reach out to your peers and leaders? How can you express the value that your team delivers in terms that other practices understand? And how do you facilitate greater empathy for users throughout the organization? And how do you foster greater cross-disciplinary collaboration? What opportunities can you create or spot to explore new ways of collaborating to solve problems and create value? As a designer, you usually have zero ability to ship by yourself, so you need to collaborate to deliver the thing into the hands of your users. So These are great opportunities to hopefully collaborate. Now, this might feel like you're juggling a lot, and I've intentionally only focused on some of the key topics when developing a practice. There's so much more to leadership and management, and often at this early stage, you're still a practitioner too. That means you're trying to figure all this out, and at the same time, you're learning what your new practice members need, and you're probably still trying to do some design work too. So where do you focus? This is just a simple example of how to reflect. I've asked a lot of questions already in this talk. Reflect on how you answer each of those today. Rate from 1 to 10 where you are today. Even better, get some feedback on how well it's going. Some things will be great. Some things might need some work, but rate again from 1 to 10 where you want to be in 3 months' time. Take into consideration your priorities, what you need, your goals, what you need to do. Identify some priorities in those gaps. And if you need help in figuring out where to start first, have a look at what has the most impact and what is most urgent. It might be helpful to use a framework to visualize the different parts of practice leadership. There's a lot to consider. So Jason Misuch and I have created a framework to reflect on leadership capabilities. Might be useful. As you're beginning to develop your practice, make this reflection a habit. You're not going to do all of this proficiently. Gather feedback and repeat regularly. So how do you scale beyond the first team then? How do you move beyond that first unit? It's often a real step change. A team that works in close proximity easily stays connected and has a lot of opportunity to create that community themselves. Distributed teams often need more help. And let me just give you a simple example, and you might be able to relate to this if you've ever found it hard to find something again in Google Drive. It's hard to find your own stuff. It's hard to find stuff of people that you're directly working with. So you know it's there, you just can't find it. But how do you help people find and discover things they haven't been involved with? They can create waste valuable time rediscovering the same problem solution over and over again. So how do you help them? How do you help remove uncertainty? You can introduce additional structures, but you need to weigh that up against losing some autonomy and room for exploration. This might sound a little bit abstract. I mean, you can prescribe more of, this is how we do things, this is how we do it well, or this is the one way we do X. This is our playbook for how to do research, interaction design, whatever else. But that actually cuts down on room for exploration, and it's really easy in the beginning as a single group in one space to be able to stay connected on that and not need that extra scaffolding, that extra structure. But as you grow, you need to be more proactive to keep things shared and visible. So you want to make room for everyone to improve on current practices, but they need to be aware of what our current shared understanding is and start there. So start with what's already known, build on it if it doesn't suit your needs, so you don't reinvent the wheel and waste time. And share what you're learning and improvements so others can advance with you. To keep up engagement at scale, you need to create a community of practice to bridge those boundaries. And that will look different depending on what boundaries you need to cross. Is it between products? Is it across departments? Perhaps geographies, time zones, cultures? How do you keep communication flowing? And what structures do you need to put in place to keep things shareable and avoid duplication and effort? So how do you create opportunities for the team to come together and share their learning and keep socially connected as well? This needs a lot of motivation and motivating while we're all busy doing our work. And that's your job. touch base with everyone regularly, create time and space to gather feedback and continue to foster alignment and connection. And one thing I've learned that always holds true is what works well now will inevitably stop working. You need to continually check that your approaches are fit for purpose. And I think that sounds incredibly familiar. Treat your practice like a product. Identify needs, design experiments, gather feedback, and iterate together. I hope this has been a little bit of inspiration to help you chart your own map. It's a shame we're not in Lisbon together today, but please reach out to connect or ask any questions. Thank you so much.